Hi all, I love FIDE Open events as well as the Super Elite tournaments, and at the moment there's the Reykjavik Open. Well, it finished actually, but 2018 Reykjavik Open had a lot of very interesting games. Here is a very important game which influenced the final tournament winner. Baskaran Adhiban was playing Richard Rapport. So Adhiban is a grandmaster from the Indian state of Tamil Nadu and is one of India's elite players. He's been consistently over 2600. Richard Rapport is born in Hungary, a place called Zombafli, was a great child prodigy. He learnt at age of 4, and he's one of Europe's brightest young talents. He got his FM title in 2008, IM just a year later, 2009, and GM title a year later in 2010, when he became the world's youngest grandmaster at the age of 13 years, 11 months. And he remained the youngest GM in the world until Nizink gained his GM title in December 2010. So anyway, let's have a look at the game. D4 from Adhiban. Richard Rapport plays D5, C4. We have the Slav defense, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, d takes c4, e4, b5, holding on to that pawn, bishop e2, e6, white castles, bishop e7, a4. You might think this is a little bit strange because it's encouraging b4, which would surely weaken the e4 pawn, but white's idea is to play e5 here. Now if knight d5, I think white gets a very nice game with knight e4. So black takes on c3, e takes, bishop takes, b takes c3. So for the sacrificed pawn, white has really fractured black's pawns here. Bishop a6, and yeah, you can see that the dark squares are a bit weak, and this move now seems quite interesting. Knight e5. In a way, it seems like a sort of super dull move because it's encouraging maybe the exchange of queens. But does black really want to take on e5 and exchange the queens here? I don't know if you want to like pause the video yourself, what you would play if I gave you 5 seconds. Okay. Well, he did actually take on e5 Richard Rapport. I find it slightly strange, that decision actually, but it looks as though there should be nothing going on. Knight d7 might be better actually after knight takes here. This position though is slightly better for white, but in the game we have bishop takes e5, d takes e5. Now let's have a look at this position. Black exchanges off queens, which seems maybe a bit clingy, just trying to cling on to his extra pawn, and he's compromised the dark squares. But is this a big deal in this position? Well, white first protects that pawn, and there is an entry point on d6 here. Knight b6 really clinging on to the pawn, but rook d6. There's other targets here in the black position. Black castled here. On knight d5, bishop f3, this seems to be quite good for white. Just this continuation through. Well, that's winning the bishop. If the bishop moves, then bishop takes d5, knocking out that key piece. And this here is better for white. Look at the bishop. It's nice. It's active. There's targets for black. So yeah, this is kind of uncomfortable for black. Maybe he's already regretting the decision for this very committal continuation. So black castles, but that pawn isn't taken with the rook. We have bishop f3 instead, and yeah, this is uncomfortable. It's simply getting very uncomfortable. The rook, which hasn't moved, is usefully protecting the a4 pawn. The bishop, which hasn't moved, has usefully got dark squares to play on soon. Now here, black played knight c8, and we have this might already be a mistake, by the way. Yeah, this might already be a key mistake. White now plays rook takes c6, and maybe Richard Rapport thought this next move would be safe enough. Bishop b7. White to play. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, can you work out what White played in this position, which is a really strong move? So starting from now. Okay, rook takes c8. Yeah, this is a disaster for black. If bishop takes, then we just take the rook on a8. If rook takes, then we take on b7, forking both rooks. We end up bishop up. It's a disaster. Yeah. Rook a takes c8. Yeah. Losing 2 bishops for the rook is too much, and this pawn is now attacked, and it's very difficult to defend that pawn on c4. Rook b3. Bishop a3 hitting that rook, which gives the opportunity now to protect this pawn. Now, even though the rooks try and coordinate, bang, bishop takes c4, bang, bishop f1 protecting g2. And now there's a running c pawn, potentially h5, a5, a6, because otherwise a6 and then bishop c5, and that pawn's going to be queening. But here, after bishop c5, g6, the game ended here. White's got really no problems to win this. He could just play something like rook c1. You know, black resigned here. Rook c1 and bishop b6. And this pawn's just going through, basically. It's going to be the end of black, this pawn. Yeah, I mean, it was a tactical blunder. I think the intriguing point for me was almost as if it was a bit boring for White to play that position after the queen takes. But actually, it's really good. There's an entry point on d6. There's dark squares. And yeah, it shows that it's a kind of positional undertone, that gambit, even if the queen's come off, that White's got some positional pressure there. And it led to a sharp tactic, which made this game pretty short, actually. Adhiban eventually, he won the Reykjavik Open. So this was one of his key games against a very, very strong opponent, Richard Rapport. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.